Hey guys, Lauren Isaacs here. The other night, I gave an hour-long presentation about the Jewish people's legal rights to the land of Israel, and if you would like to see that full-length presentation, please send me your emails and I'll send it to you. For now, I want to do a short version of that material because it's so important. Everyone should know this information. Let's begin. The Jewish people own the land of Israel in a multitude of ways. We own it historically, legally, biblically, religiously, archaeologically. We own it de facto. We own it strategically, militarily, morally, and ethically. We own it in so many ways. Today, I'm going to focus on the legalities of the ownership of Israel. There are 5 main international laws and reasons why we legally own the land of Israel. And here they are. Balfour Declaration, San Remo Resolution, Mandate for Palestine, the Anglo-American Convention, and the United Nations Charter itself. These are the main points of international law, why you need to know, part of our history, we own the land of Israel. Now, the anti-Israel faction, the BDSers, the anti-Zionists, and the anti-Semites will often say the existence of Israel is violating international law. They can never actually pin down which international law. It's kind of an ethereal idea of international law for them. They can never actually tell you which international law, but on the contrary, I can tell you which international laws proves that the Jewish people rightfully own the land of Israel. So let's go through each of these very quickly. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration, the British foreign minister wrote that the British government views with favor a Jewish homeland, a national Jewish homeland in Palestine. At this time, in 1917, the Balfour Declaration was not binding international law. It was merely a suggestion and the basis for future international law. When did the Balfour Declaration actually become international law? Well, it became international law in 1920, and then it was re-ratified in 1922. What happened in 1920? April 25th, 1920 was the San Remo Resolution. Very important date, very important time. This is actually maybe the most important legal puzzle piece in the Jewish people's legal rights to the land of Israel, the San Remo Resolution. At the San Remo Resolution, the text of the Balfour Declaration was ratified, meaning it became binding international law. So that was 1920. Then we move on to 1922, where you've got the Mandate for Palestine. The Mandate for Palestine, hopefully you've all seen this map. And the original Mandate for Palestine allotted far more territory to the Jewish people than what is currently modern-day Israel. It included all of Jordan. It obviously included Gaza, fully Judea and Samaria, what is called the West Bank by some nowadays, all of Jerusalem, and beyond. So this was the original Mandate for Palestine. Now, the Mandate for Palestine was approved by the League of Nations. The League of Nations was the governing body that basically governed the entire free world at the time. So that was 1922. Skipping ahead, 1924, you've got the Anglo-American Convention, which is signed. What is this? It's lesser known, but it's very important. This actually approved the text of the Mandate for Palestine. And in the text of the Mandate for Palestine, it actually says that there's recognition that the Jewish people can settle everywhere in the land of Israel, everywhere and anywhere throughout the land of Israel. Meaning, the Mandate for Palestine, which is international law, includes the Jews are allowed to settle in the entire land, including Judea and Samaria, what is called the West Bank, including Gaza, including all of Jerusalem, including everywhere. That was the Anglo-American Convention, which is very important as well. And then we get to our final piece of international law in 1945, the establishment of the United Nations. Now, while the League of Nations was the governing body up until then, governing basically the whole free world, after World War II, the League of Nations transitioned into the United Nations. Put very simply, it turned into the United Nations, okay? And the United Nations, in the UN Charter, Article 80, which is still valid today, you can go look it up, it states that all previous League of Nations mandates that came before the United Nations are still valid and binding under international law today, which includes all the aforementioned resolutions that I just mentioned, including and up to final Mandate for Palestine, which says that the Jews can settle anywhere in the land of Israel, which actually includes 77% more territory originally than what is modern-day Israel. But even if we just look at the modern-day Israel borders, under international law, UN Charter Article 80, it states that this is the Jewish homeland, belongs to the Jews, and the Jews can settle in its entirety throughout the land, which is amazing. Although, the UN then went on to contravene its own laws, its own resolutions. It violated its own international laws. For example, with the 1947 partition plan, when the UN tried to cut Israel even more and give half to a new Arab state and give the remaining piece as a Jewish state, that was in contravention of international law. They were not allowed to do that, although the Arabs rejected that partition plan anyway, so it's moot. It's all moot. Anyway, those are the international reasons why the Jews own the land legally. These are international laws you can cite to. When an anti-Israel, anti-Semite BDSer is telling you that Israel violates international law, while they're struggling to provide even one semblance of an example somewhere, you can cite these 5 international laws that prove legality. Now, on occasion, you'll come across someone who's kind of a little more academically minded, and they will cite Geneva Convention Article 4 to prove that Israel is illegal. This is not true. It's not applicable when talking about Israel. There's actually no precedent. And in my presentations, I usually give the top 4 reasons why Geneva Convention Article 4 is not it has nothing to do with Israel. It shouldn't be cited when discussing Israel, and it doesn't prove that Israel is illegal in any way. But because we're short on time, I'm going to give you the top number 1 reason. Write to me later for a more in-depth discussion about this. Article 4 of the Geneva Convention only refers, this is important, it only refers to the invasion of sovereign recognized states. See where I'm going with this? Since an Arab Palestinian state was never sovereign territory, it was never recognized as a state, therefore, Article 4 of the Geneva Convention is inconsequential. It has nothing to do with Israel. It shouldn't be cited here at all. It becomes invalid. So it's erroneous to use that reasoning to suggest that Israel is violating any sort of international law. There are other reasons why Geneva Convention Article 4 is completely invalid as well. Write to me and I'll give you further explanation. But these are the basic reasons, guys. We need to know the legal history of Israel. One more point that I'll put forward is that when we're talking about the mandate for Palestine, for example, and we cite it as international law, some will argue that, the British were colonizers. They had no right to be there anyway. They shouldn't have had the mandate over Palestine. They shouldn't have had administration over that territory anyway. So the territory should therefore revert to the previous owners, which before the British got it was who? The Ottoman Empire. So for that argument, that is erroneous. That's asinine. That is just a ludicrous argument because the Ottoman Empire is one of the most successful conquering, colonizing empires, brutal, violent empires in the history of the world. So while the British did a huge amount of colonizing as well for their empire, so too the Ottomans really colonized tons of area, including Israel. They came in, they slaughtered people, they destroyed property, they forcibly converted people, and they conquered and held that land illegally for a long time. Now, to suggest that a colonizing power's land should revert to another colonizing power's land is just crazy. If you want to talk about reverting to the legal owners, the Jewish people are the indigenous people there. They're the only people with international laws, resolutions, and mandates giving them legal rights to the land. The ancient kingdom of the Israelites is the only kingdom who ever ruled over that land with sovereignty. It all points in one direction. The Jewish people legally and irrefutably own the land of Israel. Make sure you know the history. Make sure you know the legality. Feel free to write to me with questions or anything you want to discuss. Thanks for joining me, guys. I'm Yisrael Chai. Let's educate ourselves and others. Take care.